Hey everybody, welcome back. We're continuing our reading of The Sword of Allah. It's been amazing. So, page turning, to be honest. We're on page 70, towards the bottom. The Muslim group now returned to camp, and a strong guard was placed at the crossing. On the afternoon of the next day, Khalid moved up with a squadron, intending to succeed where Ikramah had failed. He tried to cross the ditch, but this time the Moslem guard at the crossing saw him advance and deployed in sufficient time to prevent his crossing. There was a heavy exchange of archery in which one Moslem and one Quraysh were killed, but Khalid was unable to cross. Dang, and when someone's saying like a heavy exchange of just arrows coming down, could you imagine the sound of that, just like whoosh, all those arrows coming past you? Since the opposition at the moment appeared too strong to overcome, Khalid decided to resort to stratagem. He moved his squadron back, as if he had given up his intention of crossing the ditch, and placed it at some distance from the ditch. The Muslims took the bait, and believing that Khalid had abandoned his attempt to cross the ditch, withdrew and began to relax, waiting for the peace and quiet of the night. Wait though, is there gonna be ambush? Suddenly Khalid galloped back with his squadron, and before the Muslim guard had time to redeploy, a few of the Quraysh led by Khalid managed to cross the ditch. So he's got a small little number of men, easier to control. But they had not advanced far from the ditch when the Muslims formed up again and held Khalid within the small bridgehead which he had occupied. Oh, so he's trapped, sounds like. Khalid tried hard to break through, but the Muslim resistance was too strong, and he had no success. There was some hand-to-hand fighting between the Quraysh group and the Muslim guard, in which Khalid killed one Muslim. Notice there was like not a lot of huge casualties. I thought it would be like more of a massacre, right? You think if there was a heavy exchange of arrows, as I mentioned earlier, you would be seeing people drop like flies, but it appears not, right? The savage also was there, and with the same javelin that he had used against Hamza at Uhud, he killed a Muslim in the sally across the ditch. Oh, really? Before long, however, seeing the situation as hopeless, Khalid broke contact and withdrew across the ditch. This was the last major military action in the Battle of the Ditch. So there's the Battle of Uhud, the Battle of Badr, the Battle of the Ditch. Okay. For the next 2 days there was no activity except for a certain amount of sporadic archery, which did no damage to either side. The Muslims now ran out of food, but their courage was hardened by desperation. I mean, there's an argument there. What do you men do when they're faced with desperation? And they were determined to starve rather than surrender to the hated infidel. In the Allied camp, tempers rose and spirits fell. Everyone knew that the expedition, which had been expected to lead to a glorious victory, had ended in fiasco. I like how he says, tempers are rising and spirits are falling. Interesting. There was widespread grumbling, and what made the situation intolerable was the fact that no one could find a way out of this impasse. Well, somebody's going to, and we're going to find out who, right? Then on Tuesday night, March 18th, the area of Medina was struck by a storm. Cold winds lashed at the Allied camp and howled across the valley. The temperature dropped sharply. The Allied camp was more exposed than the Muslim camp, and the storm appeared to strike the Allies with vengeance. It put out fires, knocked down cooking pots, carried away tents. The Allies sat huddled under their blankets and cloaks as the storm raged around them, waiting for an end that would not come. Abu Sufyan could take no more. He leapt to his feet, and raising his voice against the storm, shouted to his men, "This is no proper abode for us. Men and animals have suffered grievously from exposure." Okay, so Abu Sufyan's at his breaking point. The Bani Qurayza have turned out to be pigs and monkeys and have betrayed us in our hour of need. So maybe pig, like, they want comfort, they don't want to get out and do what they're supposed to. Monkeys as in, like, they won't follow orders, right? They just doing what they want to do. The storm has ravaged our camp, put out our fires, knocked down our tents. Let us return to Mecca. Lo, I am one who goes. Ray's taking it aside. He's like, man, this is not working. I'm out of here. Having made this last speech, Abu Sufyan jumped onto his camel and rode out with his men, hoping to get away from the pitiless storm. But the demons of the storm were to pursue him the whole night. That's such a cool way to picture it. I picture like a big sandstorm just like following him. Like in The Mummy, in that movie. The movie The Mummy. Remember when was that number 1 or number 2? Oh, I think it was number 2. Either way, there was a cool sandstorm that chased them when they were in the plane. The Ghatfan now came to know of the movement of the Quraysh, and so did the other tribes. Without further delay they mounted their camels and departed for their settlements and pastures. In the rear of the Quraysh army rode Khalid and Amir bin Alas with their cavalry squadrons. Okay, so they're in the rear, Khalid and Amir bin Alas, acting as rear guard in case the Muslims should come out of Medina and attempt to interfere with the Quraysh movement. It was a bitter, disillusioned Abu Sufyan who led his army back to Mecca. Oh man, could you imagine what it would be like to hear the conversations that Khalid and Amr and Abu Sufyan, what they're having as they ride? Like what they want to do. Oh, that'd be so cool, man, to see that. The burden of failure lay heavy on his heart. The next morning the Muslims found the Allies gone and returned to their homes. This was the last attempt by the Quraysh to crush the Muslims. Henceforth they would remain on the defensive. Oh, okay. The Battle of the Ditch was over. Each side had lost 4 men. It was a victory for the Muslims in that they achieved their aim of defending themselves and their homes against the Allies. Okay, so the Battle of the Ditch had very low casualties. That says you can look at that in 2 ways. Another one was good at defense, the other one was bad at offense, right? Their aim of defending themselves and their homes against the Allies, while the Allies failed in their attempt to crush the Muslims. In fact, the Allies failed to do any damage at all. The siege had lasted 23 days and had imposed a terrible strain on both sides. It had been ended by the storm, but the storm was not the cause of the raising of the siege. Oh, so the storm. Okay, let's put a little annotation. Storm, because remember it made them all helpless, like, oh, it's ravaged our camp and he took out all the fires. It was the last straw. So that's the straw that broke the camel's back. Strictly speaking, this operation was a siege and a confrontation rather than a battle, for the 2 armies never actually came to grips. Oh, that's a good distinction for us then. Perfectly said. So, yeah. Good military grammatical term distinction there. This was the first instance in Muslim history of the use of politics and diplomacy in war, and it shows the interplay of politics and arms in the achievement of national aim. In the achievement of national aim, diplomacy in war, interplay of politics. The use of armed force is one aspect of war, a violent and destructive aspect, to be used only when political measures fail to achieve the aims of the state, or so we hope. When a shooting war becomes inevitable, politics with diplomacy as its principal instrument prepares the ground for the use of armed force. It sets the stage, weakens the enemy, and reduces his strength to a state where armed force can be employed against him with the maximum prospect of success. Now you see how he was a general himself, right? What was he? Le General Ali Akram, right? So the way he wrote that. So if you're going to shooting, it's a sign, hopefully, that your diplomacy failed. But certain people don't even go the diplomacy route, and some people just get stuck in the diplomacy route. So this is true, but indeed he has a point when arguing how it sets the stage. And this is just what the Prophet did. He used the instrument of diplomacy to split and weaken the enemy, not only in numbers but also in spirit, so reducing numbers and reducing morale. Most of the Muslims could not understand this, but they were learning from their leader. The Prophet's word, war is stratagem, were to be remembered and frequently quoted in later Muslims' campaigns. Okay, nice. War is stratagem. Oh, I said that something very similar once in a class because I said it was the ultimate contest, and the teacher didn't really like it. He went on a rant, but it's still true. Alright, now the next... Oh, actually we should cut it off here because we're at the 10-minute mark. And we're beginning a new section. We don't want to begin the new section and then have it cut out. Alright.